We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help.
Is that we have a higher pain threshold than our partners to the south of us. We can continue to fight. We will have to bring the fight, and it will hurt Americans as well.
So there's a real bunch of emotions in Canada right now. But just from a strictly economic point of view, the pure libertarian approach is don't harm our citizens to get back at Trump for harming his. Now, I know that's hard to not punch back when you feel punched, but that's just the economist point of view. But it actually would go to inflation, wouldn't it? Talk a little bit about what would happen if we put tariffs on U.S. imports.
Well, Ezra, number one, you don't win a fight by punching yourself in the face, right? Like, I hate that I have to say that. You win a fight by getting stronger, right? So think about it this way. An American tariff is sort of like a sales tax in the sense that it's a tax on Americans that increases prices on American consumers. Well, if the U.S. government raise sales taxes, the Canadian government's response shouldn't be to hike up our own sales tax. No, like what we should be doing here in Canada is making Canada strong, making Canada competitive. And that means slashing taxes, slashing government waste, slashing government regulations, and actually building pipelines here in Canada. Now, I'm glad you brought up how tariffs will impact Canadians. Like, there is no refuting the simple fact that when President Donald Trump imposes tariffs, that will hurt Canada. There is no refuting that. But you know what's the one thing that will make that worse? If the federal government imposes tariffs on Canadian citizens, right? So look, a 25% across the board tariff from the US government, well, that would cost each Canadian about $1,300, okay? But if Canada were to retaliate, that would increase that cost to about $1,900 per Canadian. So you can see that Trump's tariffs will hurt Canada, but what would make that worse for Canadians right now who are struggling is retaliatory tariffs. Let me bring up some other data here from the Peterson Institute, okay? So no retaliation from Canada, you're looking at inflation of about 1.7%. If Canada retaliates, the inflation jumps up to about 3%. So, like, make no mistake about it, I understand the emotion of fighting back. However, I don't think the right solution is for our federal government to hammer Canadians with another tax, which is exactly what retaliatory tariffs are. What I think will work is if we finally do what we should have been doing in Canada for so long, ending the carbon tax, saying no to capital gains tax hikes, drastically reducing income taxes, and drastically reducing the size and cost of the state here at home.
You know, here's one more thing I'm worried about. I don't know if you remember, but the first responses we heard from Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland to these threats of tariffs, remember, Trump made them in November. He said, I want that border fixed up by the time my inauguration comes around, or else there'll be hell to pay. So he sort of gave a 2-month heads up. And so those first reactions, Doug Ford, but especially the federal Liberals, remember what they said? They said they really wanted the trade war, in my view, because that lets them wrap themselves in the flag and be heroes. Instead of fixing the border, they focused on the fight. They said, we're going to do what we did during COVID-19. We're going to have massive transfers of wealth from borrowing and taxing to give it to those industries that are affected. Like, I can imagine these tariffs could be devastating to the auto industry if they remain. So what we heard from Doug Ford and Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland is tens of billions of dollars paid to, well, I don't know, anyone, everyone, the industries in question. I'm worried that if Trudeau or Mark Carney bring in countervailing tariffs, or if Pierre Poilievre does it, that it'll just be a tax windfall for the Canadian government, and it'll be an excuse for them to tax and spend. That's all a tariff is. Just use the word import tax. So if Trudeau or Carney or Freeland or even Pierre Poilievre bring in an import tax, well, Politicians love doing that, and there's nothing they love more than an emergency. I'm sorry, I don't want to do this, but it's a climate emergency. I got to give you a carbon tax. I'm sorry, I don't really want to do this, but it's a COVID emergency, so I got to have a tax increase in Bohr. I'm sorry, there's a trade emergency. These emergencies keep on happening. What can I do? I got to tax you more because I love spending. There's always an emergency when taxes are involved.
We will use every tool at our disposal so Canadian workers and businesses can weather this storm. From expanding EI benefits and making them more flexible to providing direct supports to businesses, we will be there as needed to help. But Canada, make no mistake, no matter how long this lasts, no matter what the cost, the federal government and other orders of government will be there for you. We will defend Canadian jobs.
Well, look, we saw the government use the cloud of COVID to go on a debt-fueled spending spree, right? Massive money printing. And what happened there? Well, I mean, obviously, so many businesses struggled, so many Canadian workers struggled, but we also saw the printing press on overdrive, which led to the 40-year high inflation in 2022, right, during the pandemic years. So, look, I'm very concerned that politicians always have the incentive to use an emergency or a crisis as a shield to expand the size and the cost of government. You know what I mean? Like, think about who benefits from a tariff war, if we can call it that, right? Well, who benefits? The power centers, right? Politicians get to show Canadians that they're fighting back, that they're doing something. Bureaucrats, right? Now they have expanded roles, hire more bureaucrats, spend a bunch of other people's money. Well, who loses in a tariff war where the U.S. imposes tariffs and then Canada retaliates? Who loses? The ordinary American and Canadian citizens. Yeah. That's who loses from this.
Yeah. I just wish Parliament were in session right now so we could learn more about what diplomacy, if any, was being used here. I mean, Justin Trudeau has been going over to Europe for photo ops and flying around and doing all sorts of stuff. I don't know when the last time he's talked to Donald Trump is. And we just don't know any of those questions because we don't have question period. We don't have emergency debates. How we can make massive decisions like what the retaliation is without the House of Commons even discussing it is shocking to me. I don't know. I do not feel like Canada is staffed up. I don't believe we're on solid ground. I don't think this government has a mandate. I think Parliament being dissolved is insane. And I think that there's a huge moral hazard, if you know what I mean, because it's actually in the political interest of the Liberal Party to have a big old fight with Donald Trump that is more politically valuable to them than just solve the problem. And I think we're going to be hit hard. But as you said before, on April 1st, we're going to hit ourselves even harder with our own tariff of sorts. I'm talking about the carbon tax pricing. One last thing, Franco. I saw Mark Miller the other day saying Canadians can withstand a lot of pain. Here's a quick clip of that.
Is that we have a higher pain threshold than our partners to the south of us. We can continue to fight. We will have to bring the fight, and it will hurt Americans as well. Not to mention, and it's important to reiterate, that 35 of those states, their primary trading partner is Canada, so it will hurt them. And we hope that logic will prevail.
Well, Mark Miller can stand a lot of pain because he every year has given himself an automatic pay raise on April Fool's Day. It's so fitting. So he'll do fine. He's a cabinet minister. He makes serious six-figure income. He will be able to do this without feeling the pain, but the pain will come from ordinary Canadians. Last word to you, Franco.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot easier to say something like that when you take a $300,000 taxpayer-funded salary and you pad your pockets with more pay every single year, courtesy of the taxpayer.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.